This happened more than 10 years ago, but I still remember every second of it like it was yesterday. It was the night of my 14th birthday party, a sleepover with a few close friends that ended in the most horrifying way I could have ever imagined. Let me give you some context. At the time, my parents had a partially renovated garage on our property. It had walls, electricity, and even a bathroom, but still had the old roll-up garage door, which didn't completely seal shut. There were no curtains on the windows either. Our property wasn't isolated, but our closest neighbor was nearly 2 kilometers away. We lived in one of those areas where people didn't really lock their doors, back then at least. My brothers usually got to sleep out in the garage when they had friends over, but I had never been allowed to. Since it was my birthday, I begged my parents to let me and my friends have our sleepover in the garage. My mom was skeptical, but my dad agreed, as long as I locked the garage door from the inside and lights were out by 11 p.m. We promised. And after a sugar-fueled day of chaos, the 5 of us finally settled into the garage for the night. But sleep wasn't happening. Instead, like most overexcited teenagers, we decided to play hide-and-seek in the dark. About 3 rounds in, my best friend was it. I was hiding behind a cupboard near the garage door. It was pitch black, and I was pressed up against the wall. Suddenly, I heard giggling behind me. At first, I assumed it was an echo. There was no way someone could have squeezed in behind me. A few seconds later, someone else got caught, and I heard the giggling again, still behind me. I started to feel uneasy, but didn't want to be the one to ruin the game, so I quietly shifted to a new hiding spot, this time facing one of the windows. That's when I saw it. A shadow passed by the window and stopped. At first, I thought it might be my dad or older brother coming to check on us, so I froze. A moment later, my best friend accidentally bumped into me and laughed. I quickly hushed her and whispered, "My dad's outside. We need to get back in bed before he catches us." We grabbed the others and climbed under the blankets, giggling quietly, thinking we'd just dodged getting into trouble. But when I turned to look back at the window, the shadow was still there. It hadn't moved. That's when I really started to panic. A few moments passed and the shadow drifted away, but then scratching from the garage door. This time everyone heard it. We all huddled together, whispering nervously, hoping we were just imagining things. But it didn't stop. The scratching turned into knocking and then giggling. High-pitched, deliberate giggling. Not the kind of laughter you'd hear from a kid, but something much more disturbing, almost unhinged. We were frozen. There was no phone in the garage. I had just gotten one for my birthday, but it was still in the house with my presents. We had no way to call for help. Then came the banging on the windows. We saw the figure clearly this time, a tall, broad shadow. Too big to be one of us. Too big to be any of our family members. We tried blocking the windows with mattresses, but the figure just moved to another window. Still giggling. Still banging. We fled into the small bathroom, leaving the door cracked just enough so I could keep watch. The shadow was now rattling the garage door, hard, like he was trying to force it open. And through it all, he never stopped that chilling, manic giggle. I couldn't take it anymore. I screamed, the loudest, most desperate scream I've ever let out in my life. And the others followed, screaming, crying, terrified. The banging stopped. Suddenly, we saw the house lights turn on, and my dad came running toward the garage. At the same time, we heard a car start up and take off from the road nearby. My dad unlocked the garage with his key and opened the door to find 5 hysterical girls in a full-blown panic. We rushed into the house where my mom tried to calm us down. That night, we all ended up sleeping together in my parents' king-size bed, too scared to be anywhere else. None of us got a good night's sleep. And needless to say, we never had another sleepover in the garage again, not for 2 whole years. Even after that, none of us slept with the lights off for a long, long time. My parents started locking every single door and window from that night on. And as for me, I've never forgotten the sound of that giggling. I don't think I ever will. This happened back when I was in 6th grade. I was part of a small, close-knit group of 4 girls, and we did everything together. Sleepovers were our thing, and since all of our parents knew each other and we lived pretty close, no more than 10 minutes apart, we'd take turns hosting every few weekends. One particular night, the sleepover was at my friend Caitlin's house. It started out like any other: junk food, movies, and non-stop giggling. But this time, Caitlin's two cousins happened to be visiting for the weekend, and were staying overnight too. Caitlin's older siblings were great. She had two sisters and a brother, all in high school or older, and they mostly stayed in their rooms. Her brother would sometimes let us play his PlayStation, and the sisters talked to us about boys and high school drama, which at the time made them feel like celebrities. Her younger cousin, a girl in 8th grade, was quiet but sweet. She stayed with one of the older sisters and didn't bother us. The other cousin, though, a junior in high school, was different, and not in a quirky or shy kind of way. He gave me the creeps. He was pale and stringy, with shoulder-length dirty blonde hair that looked like it hadn't seen shampoo in a while. Skinny, almost frail-looking, but with this weird, self-satisfied smile like he was always thinking something he found funny that nobody else understood. He didn't look 17, more like a scrawny 14-year-old stuck in the wrong body. Caitlin looked visibly uncomfortable around him. Later, when we were all in Caitlin's room talking before bed, she told us she had only just met her cousins. Apparently, her mom and their mom, her aunt, hadn't spoken in years. They'd only just reconnected, and this visit was supposed to be their big family reunion. Caitlin said the girl cousin was fine, but the guy had been weird from the start. He kept trying to hang out with her instead of her brother, would wander into her room uninvited and go through her stuff. He'd pet her hair or cup her cheek like she was a little kid, but when she'd pull away, his whole face would freeze, like a switch flipped. Then came that smile, cold, slow, like it was meant to cover something up. We all agreed something was off. Eventually, we moved on to regular sleepover stuff, movies, snacks, gossip, and started getting ready for bed. We had a routine, one bathroom in the hallway we all took turns using to brush our teeth and get ready. I didn't really care about going first, so I went last. Lucia came back from the bathroom and said she was done, so I headed down the hallway half asleep, barely paying attention. I opened the bathroom door and flipped the lights on. He was sitting there in the dark on the toilet, fully clothed, just sitting. I froze and apologized, quickly shutting the door, heart pounding. I turned to run back down the hall, but before I could move, he opened the door and stepped out. He looked at me and smiled. "Go ahead," he said. "You can use it now." I didn't want to. Every bone in my body was screaming leave, but I also didn't want to make a scene. So I went in, locked the door, and brushed my teeth as fast as I could. When I stepped back out, he was still there, still smiling. "Let me walk you back to your room," he said. He didn't wait for an answer, just grabbed my hand, warm, damp, and sweaty, and started walking me back. I didn't say a word. I could barely breathe. The hallway suddenly felt like it stretched on forever. He let go when we reached Caitlin's door. "Good night," he whispered. When I stepped inside, I guess I looked shaken because all my friends rushed to ask what was wrong. I told them, and Caitlin looked horrified. She said she'd talk to her mom in the morning. I wish that had been the end of it. We weren't allowed to lock doors during sleepovers. It was a house rule, and usually that wasn't a big deal. But not that night. I was sleeping soundly when Caitlin shook me awake, her voice trembling. She said her cousin had opened the door to the room twice already. Both times, he just stood there, watching us. I felt sick. Caitlin was terrified. She asked me to sleep in her bed with her, and I didn't hesitate. We lay there in silence, eyes fixed on the door. Then it opened again. The hallway was dark, but the moonlight through the window gave just enough glow to see the shape, his head peeking around the doorframe. He stood there motionless, watching us. Then, as if it were the punchline to some private joke, he let out a little laugh through his nose. "Hey, Caitlin," he whispered, and closed the door. We held each other the rest of the night. He never came back. Maybe knowing we were awake ruined the fun for him, but none of us slept after that. My mom picked me up early the next morning. I was grateful I didn't have to see him again. Caitlin later told me her mom had been deeply disturbed by the story and promised to speak with her sister. My mom must have heard about it too, because she later asked me about what had happened and made it clear I'd never sleep over at Caitlin's house again if those cousins were around, but they never came back. I don't know if Caitlin's mom had another falling out with her sister, or if she just quietly made the decision to keep her family safe. All I know is I still think about that night sometimes. That smile, the hand, the whisper in the dark, and how we were never really alone in that house. This happened when I was 14. It's one of those memories that creeps up every few years, and every time it does, it leaves me with that weird, unsettled feeling in the pit of my stomach. So I'll start with the basics. I grew up in a small southern town, the kind of place where you go to kindergarten with someone and end up graduating high school with them. That's just how it was. So, when a new kid named Vinny transferred in halfway through the year, he got a lot of attention. Vinny was odd. He always sat alone at lunch, and one thing that stood out about him, something that became a bit of a joke, was that he'd lose his mind if someone asked if he skated. Which, of course, made it a challenge for guys like me. I wasn't the coolest kid, but I had this obnoxious charm that made people laugh, even if it meant being a bit of a douche. I remember the first time Vinny and I had class together. The teacher asked if he'd gotten his textbooks yet, and he replied with a completely straight face. My wife never confirmed my school schedule with the front office. Everyone cracked up. "You're 14 with a wife?" Clearly, he was just messing with the teacher, or so we thought. One afternoon, me and a few friends were skating when we saw Vinny nearby. We started talking about that weird wife comment, laughing, but slowly, we got curious. He was strange, yeah, but there was something about him that drew us in. After about a week of slowly letting him hang out with us, he kind of became one of the guys. Eventually, we decided to ask if we could spend the night at his place, like we did with each other all the time. We figured we'd skate, play video games, and maybe smoke a little. Vinny seemed hesitant at first, but the next day, he told us his parents said it was fine. That Friday, we loaded up our backpacks, strapped on our boards, and rode to his house. And that's where everything started to feel wrong. First, we met his parents. On the surface, they seemed friendly enough, but Vinny's dad, he had this massive weapons collection. And instead of keeping it a secret, he showed us. Took us out to a field by a canal and let us shoot assault rifles. Now, at the time, we thought that was the coolest thing ever. Looking back, though, letting a bunch of unsupervised 14-year-olds shoot military-grade weapons, that wasn't cool. That was insane. Then we met Vinny's wife. She was real. A 26-year-old woman. No joke. They held hands, sat together. She even called him her husband. I mean, back then, we thought it was some kind of flex. Like dating a senior when you're a freshman. Except this was way beyond that. He was a freshman, and she was paying taxes. Things only got weirder. While we were hanging out, Vinny's dad sat down with his arm around Vinny's mom, and his other arm around a girl who looked maybe a year or two older than us. That girl apparently was also his wife. Then came 2 hours of prayer in the living room. I grew up Catholic, but whatever they were doing, I didn't recognize it. It wasn't any service or ritual I'd ever seen. It felt different and intense. After the prayer, we were finally allowed outside to skate, but just a few minutes later, Vinny's dad came out and barked at us to get back in the house. Then his mother lined us up outside the bathroom to take baths. And here's the kicker. We weren't allowed to drain the water between turns. I was the last to go in, and all the mirrors in the house were covered with sheets. At that point, I didn't even know how to feel. Nervous, grossed out, confused, I just wanted the night to be over. We were told to go to bed even though the sun hadn't even gone down yet. Vinny slept with his 26-year-old wife, while the rest of us crammed into one queen-sized bed in a spare room, whispering about how this was easily the worst sleepover of our lives. Just when we thought it couldn't get any more uncomfortable, we started hearing sounds from the next room, his parents, and possibly that younger girl. That was it. At around 11 p.m., we all quietly packed our stuff, grabbed our boards, and left. We rode our bikes through some rough neighborhoods in the dark, but we didn't care. Anything was better than staying another minute in that house. We crashed at my buddy's place and didn't even tell our parents what happened, at least not the full story. But Vinny's mom, she ended up calling our families and leaving weird, cryptic voicemails. Vinny was pulled out of school the next week. We never saw him again. Years later, I looked him up on Facebook out of pure curiosity. That's when I found out. He's dead. His profile, along with ones I believe belonged to his mother, father, and sister, all showed that they'd passed away. No details, no dates, no causes. Just gone. To this day, I don't know what that family was involved in. Maybe it wasn't a cult, maybe it wasn't criminal. Maybe it was just some off-the-wall lifestyle I was too young to comprehend. But whatever it was, we knew something was wrong. And even though I try to laugh it off now, I still think about that night. The covered mirrors, the shared bathwater, the prayer, the gun collection, the girl he called his wife. Something was not right in that house, and I'm glad we got out when we did.